också säga hej and hi, Chun-Li. Welcome to the lunch webinar which you will perform for us. We will have you do the webinar, and then afterwards we'll take questions and have a dialogue. So I please ask for you who are the listeners to write the questions in the chat, or afterwards remember them and we will help to translate to English if it's necessary for Chun-Li. And at last, I will also announcement for next webinar next month, and also a query for how this webinar went. So please, Chun-Li, please take over your presentation and send it out.
Good. Thank you, Jonas.
Thank you.
Can you hear me and see my screen in the full screen presenting mode?
Yes, it's fine.
Okay, good. Thanks. Thanks, Jonas. And as Jonas mentioned, I'm an associate senior lecturer at Lund University and the K2, which is Swedish National Center for Research and Education on Public Transport. So today what I'm presenting is based on the K2 project, which is about future integrate and adaptive public transport. And part of the main focus is DRT. And it was 3 years project and carried out together with researchers from Malmö University and Lund University. So very brief about DRT, and since all of you are here today, I'm sure you're already familiar with it very much. So it is an intermediate form of public transport, which, however, expected offers the similar convenience and flexibility equal to a taxi or small buses, but passengers supposed to pay lower cost than a taxi, and it can either supplant or substitute the conventional public transport. It could operate in a separate route or be integrated with the current system, the current public transport system. Passengers need to reserve the service based on, in the old time, can be telephone or website, or nowadays smartphone apps. So a little bit more about it, which opportunities it offers. It has been a service existing for many years, expected to have the advantage of saving time for the passengers and cost, as well as reduce the energy consumption. For example, if one's used to supplement on empty buses in the low demanding areas. And it's supposed to provide a more comfortable ride for the passengers, because the vehicles normally smaller buses with maybe 4 or 6, 8 seats, and with new technology development, that it's also possible to provide a lot of accessories for the passengers, for example, for charging your phone and so on. And it offers a lot of flexibility compared with the conventional public transport, because you can basically travel with the routes that you want and stop at where you want as a passenger. And also you don't have to follow the traditional timetable and travel in the time that you need as a passengers, and supposed to pay a lower cost compared to the service that you are receiving. And it does has advantage of offering a door-to-door service, and which can save a lot of time again for the passengers and increase convenience for traveling without a car. Especially with the smart technology development, it even can offer more freedom and improve the time efficiency for the passengers when they're ordering service, when they communicate with the service system, and so on. However, ATOS and service have been existing for many years, and there have been a lot of challenges and dilemmas that it faces. Based on a very recent study that a research has reviewed about 120 DRT systems in 19 countries, which was running between 1970 to about 2019. And he has identified about nearly 50% of the service has been failed. Some of them lasted about 7 years, some of them lasted about 2 years or 3 years. Among all of the countries, UK was experiencing the highest failure rate, which, however, in the EU, in Europe in general, has the lowest failure rate. But we should keep in mind that a lot of systems they have reviewed was based on the old system, like the Dare to Bus, without using smart technology today. In general, that also based on the result from other researchers, the main reasons that contribute to the failure of the system, including the high operating costs, also the passengers still consider the tickets a bit high, and or low ridership, and the flaws in the system design, for example, can be due to the lack of the marketing strategies, that passengers are not informed about the availability of the service, and also like people don't know how to use the system, and this information was not well communicated with the passengers. And so which kind of DRT service that we have considered or focused on in this project when we were presenting the service to in the different ways, and especially to our potential users. So introduce it as a service, basically everyone can book it, and you only pay for the tickets per passenger if you are using it, instead of using the car, even though instead of pay per vehicle. And you can request, the system can respond to the changes according to where and how do you want to pick up and when, and this change can be applied within a short time period. And the passenger can inform the system about where would you like to be picked up and where would you be dropped off. And so what did we investigate about the young people? So first we want to gain some fundamental facts about young people in Sweden, about their travel patterns today, in relation to their main travel activities, namely for going to school and for their leisure trips, for example, vacant leisure trips, but also after school leisure activities, and as well as also their parents' concern about attitudes toward how their children are traveling today. And we also investigate about which factors that could explain or influence that young people's attention or intention for using DRT in the future. And so a little bit about the research methods. So which data did we use? We carried out an online survey in 2021, December. So the survey was sent to those families in Skåne who has children or young people at home between 6 to 19 years old. And we touched on the young people who live in both in the urban area and rural area. In the end, we collected about 477 valid respondents. And we also touched about 60% of them are studying in the ground school and 40% of them are studying in the gymnasium. And the survey was mainly focused on asking the question based on their main trips, that is school trips and leisure trips. We considered the samples as gender balanced. About 45% of them are female, the rest are male, and about 60% of them are living in the urban area and 40% of them are living in the rural area. And so what did we find out? First, some basic facts. How do the young people travel to school and the leisure destinations? So for the school trips, as you can see, for the young people who live in the urban area, walking and cycling are their main travel modes. And however, for the young people in the suburb or rural areas, the main travel mode is public transport. But you can also notice that about 20% of them are actually going to school by car, driven by the parents. For the leisure trips, again, for the young people in the urban area, still quite a large number of them are carrying out their leisure activities either by walking and cycling. And also noticeable that nearly about 40% of them are either driven by the parents or some like the older young people can drive this A-tractor in Sweden, that we also consider that they go there by driving. So it's also quite a lot. But if you look at the young people in the rural area, there are much more of them are being delivered by the parents by car or drive alone by themselves. And also for them, a lot of them are using public transport compared with the young people who live in the urban area for their leisure activities. So what could explain and why they are using the differences between the mode they are using? One possible reason could be about the travel distance. For example, we found out that for the urban areas, for the young people living in the urban area can say, for both the school trips and for the leisure journeys, nearly 70% of them are traveling within 5 kilometers. And about 40%, between 30 to 40% of them are actually only travel within 2 kilometers. And this is a big gap and opposite for the young people who live in rural area. You can say more than half of them need to travel more longer than 5 kilometers, no matter for school trips or for leisure activities. And among them, you can say about nearly 30 to 36% of them need to travel actually more than 10 kilometers. Only small part of them can travel within 5 kilometers, compared with the young people who live in the urban area. Based on the previous studies, we have identified 9 items about that what the parents would concern about when they're thinking about how their children should go to school or their leisure activities. We found that so safety connected to traffic accidents and security associated with like social risk and crime as most concerned factors for the parents when they're thinking about how their kids should go to school. Of course, practical reasons are also important to match with the daily life rhythm and so on. It's also worth to note that you can say environmental impacts and also try to accommodate the children's wish about how they want to travel, place the least importance or impact regarding their parents' decision suggestion about how should their children go to their trips. We also questioned about the safety issue from young people's themselves perspective. You can say for the young people in the urban areas, in general, most of them, they are feeling safe for going to school and also leisure activities. But when it's come to for the young people in the rural area, you can say there's big gap or difference for the girls, for the female young people, that they feel much less safe for both going to school and the leisure activities compared with the young people living in the urban area and compared with boys. As I mentioned, we also try to test or examine which kind of factors can influence young people's intention for using DRT in the future. We tested about 40 factors that falls into these 3 aspects. The first is about their family situation related to the household context and the parents' attitudes. And the second dimension we look into about especially young people's travel habits today and their perceptions and their preference about how do they want to travel to their destinations if they could have the choices. And of course, conventional public transport is one of the service that provide most similar level of the service as the DRT. We have also examined about the level of the current traditional public transport service provision, how that influences their intention of using DRT. So we identified about 10 influential factors or significant factors explaining or predict the intention of young people to use DRT. Related to the household or family situation, so those children whose parents consider DRT as a convenient, cost-efficient, and environmental friendly travel modes, and they are more likely to use DRT in the future. And also for those young people who have siblings at home also showed stronger interest for using DRT than others. And this could explain by maybe because they can be accompanied by the elder siblings in the same transport perhaps, but maybe also easier to organize family life when you have more than one children together for the parents. Based on the young people's current travel habits and how do they go to school and later activities and how and their current travel modes, we find out that the young people who are traveling today with multimodality, that means that they can go with, for example, walking and public transport or cycling with public transport, or can be driving and then train and so on. So the young travelers who are using the multimodal way of traveling show the strongest interest for using DRT in the future. And also the young people who are traveling today with the public transport and cycling, they are also significant for using DRT in the future, but it's less, the effects less stronger compared with the users who travel with multimodality. And again, we examine that the safety is a very sensitive issue that has been significant. So for the younger group, that we assume the children who cannot really travel independently or alone, they may consider that DRT is not an ideal service because it can expose themselves to the risk of both accidents and social crime. Therefore, they would feel it's not safe enough to travel along with DRT. But for the older group, instead, they think DRT is more ideal solution than public transport because they are less vulnerable to come to the traffic accidents or dangers. And also DRT can provide them service like that they can just go get on the car or the vehicles instead of have to walk to the public transport for long distance and so on to avoid this part of the journey. So what about the level of the service, the current traditional public transport service? We find out that the young people who live in far away from public transport stops, they are more likely or show stronger interest for using DRT as an alternative, which may be explained by the advantage that because DRT just offers super convenient service for them, this can deliver them from door to door, and also allow them maybe perhaps travel independently without relying on the parents, and also avoid the journey to walking alone from home to the train stations or bus stops. So what could be the suggestions for the policies if a city or region is trying to promote DRT as one of the alternatives for reaching sustainable mobility? Who to target? So for young people who are using multimodality and conventional public transport and cyclists, they could be the group that are more interested in using DRT. And also for the, it seems like the young people who live in the rural area has higher demand for the DRT than the urban areas, and therefore DRT has more demand or potential for the young people who live in the rural areas. And it's so also for the school, so the DRT services can be provided for targeting on delivering the young people who live in the rural areas for going to school. But for the later activities, there should be potential for both young people who live in the urban area and rural areas. It depends on which type of activities or journeys or routes that the service is trying to target on. And for the service, for designing the DRT system, it's important that to consider or to inform the passengers, both as young people and parents, that it's providing a very safe service concerning traffic safety, but also social risks. So in one way, the service should secure the passengers' safety and security, but also important to inform the passengers and the passengers' parents that this feature is available and designed providing the service. And of course, it should be tailored, as I mentioned above, according to which kind of needs for delivering the kids or to the later activities or to the school. It should be in this urban area and a rural area. And from planning perspective, it depends on the local context, of course. It can act either as a last mile solution, but also a supplementary role for conventional public transport, but could also be as an alternative or competitive role for conventional public transport in an area where maybe it's too crowded. The current public has been suffering too crowded or too many passengers problem. So the DRT can provide as kind of another alternative to public transport. And it does offer small potential in the area where the where the current conventional public transport service is low, especially for those young people who live in the area far away from public transport stops. Yeah, that's basically it is. And if you want to know more information, because more comprehensive result is included in a new K2 outreach, which will be published soon in Swedish within the next few weeks, you might be informed. Thank you, and that's all. If you have any questions.
Thank you, Shanli. Yes, now time for questions. So if you have any, please raise your hand and say it in Swedish or English, and we'll try to explain it in English so Shanli can explain.
You're welcome.
So it's interesting, Shanli, that you're now releasing the report in Swedish also. So that will get my hands on as quickly as possible. So we will have some other seminars also about from this report also from also Gevinger next time. Yeah. So is there anyone who have any question? You can write it also in the chat. Yes, Natasha.
Okay, I will try to do it in English then.
Thank you.
It's surprising to me that it is such a big difference between the urban children and the living on the countryside children. Do you think the solutions that you are suggesting in this presentation, and you should focus on these areas to be successful with this kind of traffic, are the same for both? You are focusing on rural areas, but are there any other things to consider for the city children to make them use this kind of transportation more?
Yes, as it's also included in the result, I think for the city children who would like to travel for the leisure activities, there still shows demand, because then instead of relying on the timetable, the public transport, because this is not that long, so it may not necessary to travel or to travel with the car, because in the city also it's not so easy to drive with the car, considering about congestion and so on. And so also when you go to the weekend later activity, you kind of want to have more flexible when do you want to leave, because normally you have fixed time period. So in that case, the service is targeted on delivering them for going to their leisure activity destinations, which can be the destination for a lot of kids or young people. That could be the target for the young people who live in the urban areas.
Yeah, I understand that too. And when you kind of considering the results in Europe that have failed and been successful with this kind of transport, I think that the focus on for what the benefits are different maybe for city and the rural areas, as you say it.
Yes.
That was
it
not
is-
very good English, but I hope you understand. Yeah.
Yeah, I understand. Yes. Yes, because the purpose of service or the target, the purpose of the service provided in the rural area and urban are very different.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I hope I answered
Okay.
part of your questions.
Then we have Moa Magnusson. Please be free to question.
Thank you. I have a question if you have looked on how this door-to-door service, if that has affected health in any ways. Have you looked at that in this study?
You mean the health perspective?
Yeah, exactly. If the children are less walking or taking the bicycle and instead use this service, like go door to door because it's more comfortable. Have you looked at that health aspects in this study?
No, unfortunately, we didn't really include that aspect yet about the impact on the health issue, public health. But that could be an interesting dimension because we have continuing project going on at K2. Related DRT could be a dimension to be included, of course.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone more who wants to ask Chun-Li here? Okay, then I will give you a short notice about the next webinar will be, vilket kommer bli den 16 mars. Och då är det fortsättning också inom samma studie, from the same study, that's Chun-Li also, not with the question, but the subject is motintegrerat och adaptivt kollektivtrafik. Och man tittar egentligen på hur skapar vi förutsättningar för en mer integrerad kollektivtrafik med hållplatsavstånd och förutsättningar. Vi kommer också ha en senare fortsättning också med en simulering utifrån att ersätta buss och med anropsstyrd trafik i en senare föreläsning i år. Och därför ber vi få återkomma om datum för detta. Och har ni själva förslag och tips på vem som eventuellt kan vilja föreläsa om något spännande intressant ämne med fokus på serviceresor, anropsstyrd trafik och tillgänglighet, får ni jättegärna höra av sig till mig. Och även givetvis med andra ämnen, men då bollar jag vidare med dem. Någon kommentar eller fråga innan? Då vill jag också be er att göra en utvärdering på det här webbinariet så att vi kan lära oss att bli bättre på våra webbinarium. Så antingen kan ni scanna QR-koden eller så kommer jag också skicka ut till er i de mejladresserna som jag troligtvis nu får tag i webbinariets logg här. Så passa på att scanna in via mobilkameran så kommer det till ett litet kort formulär med några få frågor i som vi uppskattar så mycket. Och så passar jag på and then I will thank you once more time, Chun-Li, for you having this presentation. And I hope I see you soon again.
Thanks, it's my pleasure, and thanks for the invitation. Yeah. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye bye.